Hi, welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. I've been making some really big bags. Last year I received a whole bunch of upholstery fabric or furnishing fabric that was already pre-cut to size. I've got hundreds of these pieces, and where I've made the soft box bag before that everybody loved, I'm going to make something slightly different with these pieces of fabric here. These are all stripes. I love stripes. So it's going to be another really large bag, but I want it to be a little bit different. Rather than just having a square boxy bag, we're going to have it with diagonal sides, bigger at the bottom, smaller at the top. Let me show you what I mean. Here's one of the ones that I've done so far. I've got the tapered sides, the zip all the way across the top. I've got two sliders in here, and it's just a huge bag that you can just put all sorts of stuff into. I've put tabs on the side so that we can actually turn this into a shoulder bag if you want to, or a crossbody bag as well. So the strap is fully adjustable. You could hang it across your body, and then you could also make these in much smaller bags as well. So in the last video I showed you how to draft the pattern and also how to create your own templates. In this video we're going to be using that pattern that we've already created. I got this idea from our Facebook group. Lots of people are sharing all the things that they make, and they also share products that I haven't made myself before as well. So Chicky, this is your fault. I have been racking my brains all week trying to get this bag perfected. I needed to know how to do the angles. I needed to know how to work my corners so that they work for large bags, small bags, any bag. And I can tell you, until I got some help, I had no idea how to work out these corners. And now that I have, I am going to make a ton of these bags. I've been doing a time trial as well. I'm going to sell these in the shop and on my website. At the end of the video, I'll tell you how long it's taken me, what it's costing me, and what I'm going to sell it for. Let's get sewing. For each bag that I make, here's what we're going to need. I've got one zip that will fit across the width of the fabric, plus a little bit extra. For my stabilizer, I'm using a really lightweight Parlan. It's a very soft, fusible, fleecy. Although it's polyester, it doesn't have that synthetic feel to it, so that's really nice to work with. And I do have a link to that on my website if anyone in Australia needs it. Same with this webbing. I use 1 inch wide webbing. That's a really nice strong polypropylene webbing. I'll be using that for my tabs on the side where the zip is, but I'll also be using this for some handles. We're going to have optional adjustable handles for this bag. For the zip, we need 2 sliders. I'm using a number 5 continuous zip for my project. So we want 2 sliders for that. You can use a regular zip as well. It'll just have 1 slider on it. Make sure it's wider than your fabric though. We've got our outer fabric. In this case I'm using a really nice stripy furnishing fabric, and when I received this it was already this size. That's why we're making a bag at this size. And we also want some lining fabric, and we need our pattern that you would have drafted from the previous video. Now if you'd like to make this as a crossbody bag, then we'll need some D-rings, swivel clips, and an adjustable slider. Because I'm using 1 inch wide webbing, we are going for 1 inch wide hardware. Let's get started. The first thing you want to do is take your outer fabric and your fusible fleece and iron that to the wrong side of your fabric. And once you've done that, if you're going to sew this to sell, you'll want to put some labels on as well. So I'm actually going to go and do that for all of my bags first, then I can get started. The measurements that you're going to need for the small and the large bag are on the screen now. The first thing we're going to do before we start boxing our corners is take our lining. I'm going to use a different lining piece for the moment because this one doesn't have a right or wrong side. So the first thing you want to do with your fabric is take your lining. We've got the long side across here, the short side across here, and we're going to fold the fabric in half. So we've got 21 inches across here and 12 that way. Along this folded edge, we're going to create a false seam. What we'll do is with 1/4 inch seam allowance, we're going to start on the outside edge and sew along until you get near the center and stop with a back stitch here. From here, we're going to do the same. We're going to back stitch along here and sew to the end. That creates a false seam for the bottom of the bag, and we can open this section up so that we can turn our bag through later on. This saves me a lot of time in that I don't have to cut 2 pieces of fabric and then join them together. It's so much easier just to do this. With the lining fabric for the current bag, I will sew along the bottom edge there. Now here I'm using 1/4 inch seam allowance. When we sew up the side seams, our seam allowance will be much bigger. Back stitch here. I'll sew until I get close to the center, and then I'll back stitch. Now I'm going to leave a really good hand's width gap because this is such a big bag. I'll need that space to turn it through. Back stitch again here and sew to the end. So I've sewn that 1/4 inch hem right in the center of the fabric, and I've also ironed that flat. So this is the section that isn't stitched. If we fold that back in half, my stitching has ended here and here. I'm going to take my seam ripper, and where the stitching has ended, I'm going to come forward a little bit and poke my seam ripper in right on the very fold of the fabric, about 1 inch or so before the finished stitching. And then whilst that's flat, it's just rip that seam open and keep going until you get to the end of the other side, but go another inch or so further on. Once you open that out, you've got your opening in there. So it just saves me a little bit of time in cutting and having to line everything up to sew. It's especially useful when you're doing batch sewing. So now that that's done, I've got the right side of my fabric faced up. The hem is underneath. Take your outer fabric and we're going to place that faced down. So we want right sides facing. And line up your fabric, which should be equal in measurement now because we've taken up that extra 1/2 inch that we had on the lining. So what I'm doing here is just lining up the layers of fabric so that they're all equal, and when I cut out the corners, everything will be nice and even on all the sides. Okay, flip it back over. We're working with the stabilised side because it's easier to see. Once you've got all that lined up, we're going to fold the fabric in half. Once again, I've got 21 inches across here, and this is 12 inches. So we've got the centre at the bottom here. We want to mark the centre along here as well. So half of 21 is 10.5 inches. The metric conversions will be up on the screen as I go. We'll take the pattern that we drafted in the previous video, and this little mark that we've made in the centre here will line up with the centre of our pattern. Now my pattern piece is just slightly larger than the fabric, so what I'm going to do instead is just line up the edge of the template with the edge of the fabric. As I said in the previous video, what happens in the centre really doesn't have an effect on what you do on the outside edges as long as they're the same. So I'll fold this in half and I'll place my template along the edge of the fabric here. I've got the fold at the bottom, and it's important that I make sure the seam allowance is allowed for on the fabric, because if I don't, it'll affect the way this is cut out. Then I can just trace out this little cutout here. And this is what we need to cut out for the type of boxed corner that we need. So we're doing 2 layers here, and we're also going to do 2 layers on this side as well. So you just flip your pattern over like that, put that in place, again lining up the folded edge at the bottom and the side seam, and you can trace this out. But if you made templates from the little cutout like we did in the previous video, you've got this little cutout here. So what you can also do with your fabric, you can either use your pattern or you can just go straight to templates. So whatever size fabric you have, we'll just fold that in half one more time, mark that center, and you place your template with the largest side at the top of your bag. You'll line up this center of the cutout with the center of your fabric and line up that straight edge along the side, and then just trace out your pattern. As requested in my previous video, I now have templates available on my website. So there we have the same cutout on each side, and that's all we need to cut out. So we can set our template aside for the next bag. Let's cut this fabric out. We've got our lining as well as our fabric on the inside here, so we're going to cut everything out together. And by lining up your lining and your fabric evenly before we've marked anything, it's going to ensure that we have even corners on all sides. Now that we've got the shape of our bag, we can start sewing and putting it together. So that's the worst of it out of the way. Set the lining aside. We're going to put a zip on now. You want this to be a little bit bigger than the width of your fabric. So about the width of your thumb is a good guide, I guess. I'll be using double-sided tape for this because it's my favourite thing to use. If you don't have access to double-sided tape, then just use pins or clips to hold your fabric in place. Peel the backing paper off, and then we'll take the zip and we're going to place that face down onto the fabric. And by having the zipper tape longer than your fabric, you don't have to worry about finding the center of anything. So that saves you a lot of time as well. Another layer of double-sided tape. I did a double-sided tape test some months back for different types of tapes that are available and how they affect your machines. I'll pop a link in the description for that. But I've actually found the manufacturer for the double-sided tape that I like to use, and I now have it on my website if you're in Australia or New Zealand. Anywhere else in the world it's a little bit expensive. Now that we've placed the zip with the bumpy side faced down, we can take our lining, and before we do that, we're going to remove the bottom half of the zipper tape. So just separate that. And we can grab the lining, and we want the side that's got the seam faced up. So once again, we want right sides facing, and we're going to line up the side edges first and then bring it up to the top and press that together. And if you don't have double-sided tape, then just go and clip all the layers together like that. We'll flip this around to the other end. We'll run some more tape along, take the other side of your zipper tape, and we've got the coil on one side that needs to be faced down and facing away from the top edge of your fabric. So you want the flat side of your zipper tape to be along the top. This doesn't have to line up with the tape that we've put on the other end because we'll be lining that up when we put the sliders on. Another bit of tape. I practically eat this stuff. And then we need our lining. Once again, line up the sides first and then bring it up to the top. Now we can go to the machine, put your zipper foot on or a narrow foot, and we're going to sew really close to the zipper teeth all the way along this edge and this edge as well. When I go to the machine, I will actually sew with my stabilised fabric on the top, because that will help prevent the fabric underneath from stretching out and extending beyond the end of my fabric. It'll help keep the layers together. Once we've done that, we're going to turn this the right way out. So you bring the fabric around the right way, and then we'll top stitch the zips in place. Now it's at this point I'm going to confess something to you. When I do batch sewing and I'm inserting the zip, I don't use a smaller zip. I don't use a smaller stitch length. I use the same stitch length for installing the zip as I do for the top stitching. It just saves having to remember to change my stitch length, and it also saves time. You don't need to have a smaller stitch length here because you're going to be stitching the whole lot twice. So my stitch length at the moment is 3.5. That side's done, and now I can flip around and do the other side. It pays to check how much bobbin thread you've got in the machine, because I've stitched this whole row without any thread. Let's do that again. Now we can turn this the right way out. So what we have now is the outer fabric on the top, the lining fabric directly behind it, and you want to pull the lining fabric away from the zipper edge. And to help my lining sit better inside the bag, I'm not going to top stitch right along the very top edge. I'm going to top stitch about 1/4 inch away from that folded edge. And by doing that, you can see that the lining sits well away from the edge of the zip, and when the bag is closed later, you're not going to have the lining puffing out. And I'll repeat that for the other side. Okay, the top stitching's been done. Did I mention labels before? If you're putting a label on, I put my label on about 4 inches from the top edge of the fabric before my zip goes on. Let's put the sliders on. Bring your fabric around so that the zip is at the front. Now there are many different ways of putting zips in. Some people like to cut some teeth out. Some people like to use zipper jiggers. Some people like to put them in with the tape upside down, so you would have the fabric the other way around. There are many different ways. What I'm showing you today is just my way of doing them, and I've found it to be pretty easy. In saying that, there's many times I have trouble getting my zipper sliders on. Normally what I would do is line up the top edge of my fabric here, and then I would line up my zipper tape and cut that evenly. But because I'm working with stripy fabric here, it's more important for me to make sure I match up my stripes. I did try to cut everything as straight as I could earlier. So I've lined up the stripes on my fabric, and the edge of my fabric is actually almost perfect. So I can live with that as long as my stripes are even. So what I'm going to do here is trim my zipper tape so that the teeth in the middle are evenly aligned. I'll take my slider, and I've got the curved edge facing me, pop that over one side, and I'm just going to hold that in place gently. Pop this one on the other side. I wasn't gentle enough. I'll pop this one on the other side, and I want to put this tape in so that it lines up with the top of the tape on the other side. I'm going to give a push now, and you'll hear a click, and that's locked those teeth together. So now what you can do is just put your fingers on either side and give that a push. Sometimes when you give your slider a push, depending on the locking mechanism that you have, you may actually need to hold the lever up and push it on because it has a little locking claw on there. I'll actually show you some examples of that in another video when I get some time. So that's nice and even at the top there. We'll slide this across to the other end. And I've got all my stripes matching, which I'm really happy about. If it didn't match, I would try it again. Now with the fabric at this end, you can see this steps up a little bit. I'm not going to worry about lining up the straight edge of the fabric here because it's more important to have my stripes lined up. But I will make sure that my zipper teeth are lined up at the top. Once again, we'll put the slider on with the curved edge facing you. Line that up along the top, give it a push. So now I have to try that again. Sometimes it doesn't go the first time or the third time. Give it a push. That's it. And then we want to make sure that these meet up in the middle here without it being kinked out. So if you have one side higher than the other, chances are they're not even on the side there. You'll just undo one of the sliders and put it back on again. Let's bring this to the middle. That's a good safe spot to have the sliders in case we forget to open our zippers up. Now I'm going to be using my webbing for tabs on the end. With my 3-inch webbing pieces, I'm going to take my D-rings and place one on each piece of webbing and fold that over. Then I'm going to clip that in place on the top section only. We don't want to clip it on this, just on the top where the zipper is, and I'll do this at the other end as well. So the D-rings are optional. You don't need to put them on at all, unless of course you want to put shoulder straps or bag handles. But I saw one of our viewers do this in our Facebook group and they made the bags look really nice. So now I try to do this on all of my boxy bags. We're going to take this back to the machine and we're just going to sew the tabs down, and when we do that we'll also be securing the end of our zipper tape at both ends as well. I'm going to sew with my tab at the top, so I just want to fold this out of the way, and I've reduced my stitch length back down to 3. I'll sew this with a seam allowance that's less than 1 centimetre. I'll go back over that and forward again. And that's really secure now. At the other end I'll do the same. Move the bottom piece out of the way. Alright, we have our tabs on the end there. Let's turn this inside out and we'll separate the lining from the outer fabric. And what we're going to do is just line up these cutouts and put a mark in the bottom of the fabric so that we can line it up with the middle where the zip is. Open that fabric out. I've made that little mark there and I've got my tab along here. So mark the center right in the middle where the zipper is. We'll do that at both ends. You want to make sure that this D-ring is facing the center of the bag as well. You don't want to have that slipping up here anywhere and then you'll accidentally sew over it in the next step. Flip it the other way around and we'll line up that false seam with the center of the zip as well. Once you've got all of that lined up nicely, we can take this back to the machine and we're going to sew down both side edges here with a 1 centimetre or 3/8 inch seam allowance at the beginning and the end on both sides. You want to backstitch really well as well. When we close this up shortly, we'll be putting stress on these corners. So backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. Now we're going to sew all of the layers together at each end. So we'll backstitch here. Make sure my D-ring is out of the way. And I'll always triple stitch over the bulk here. And the same for the other end. Make sure you've got all of the layers underneath there. Now that we've sewn up the side seams, we can cut off the excess zipper tape that we have on the end. There's no need to burn the edges because this is going to be enclosed inside the lining. Let's do some corners. Pinch the fabric together on the corner there and line up the straight edge. Go to the other corner and you'll line that up as well. And when you've got both corners pinned or clipped together, you can line up the rest of your fabric. So that's one corner on the outer fabric lined up. Turn your bag around and with the same lining piece that's attached at the top here, you'll just want to manipulate the fabric and spread this out. So once again, I'm going to pinch these corners out and I'm just going to clip all of those layers together. Find that other corner and line that up with the outer fabric, and then you can line up the rest. If it doesn't line up perfectly, you can really just fudge it. As long as you've got it looking nice and mostly straight, it's going to be okay. So that's out just a fraction. It's not enough to worry about. So if you struggle with this idea of sewing the lining and the outer fabric together, then I would go and sew this at the machine now and then come back and do the next section, which I think we might do just so that you can see how easy it does go together. With the outer fabric faced up, lining underneath, we will once again be doing a 1 centimetre seam allowance or 3/8 of an inch. When I get to the bulk where the seams are, which won't be in the middle this time, I'll triple stitch over that as well and back stitch at the end. So we have one corner all stitched together. On the same end we'll find the other corners that we need to line up. So we just pinch that out and you line it up from the outside corners, then along the centre. And then you've just got to manipulate your lining so that you can grab that corner and the other one, and we can ease the rest in. And rather than going back to the machine, we'll go to the other end and we'll do the same again at this end. Okay, the other 3 corners are done. Let's go and sew them all up. Okay, all of these corners are done. I can tell you this has been one of those projects that has really done my head in. I'm going to turn this the right way out, and I've left my zip partially open so I can go in and open the rest of it. Working out the angles for this has just been a real headache, but I know now that I've mastered it. At least I hope so. Let's poke out all the corners. And the technique we've used for the corners is really good because the lining isn't going to separate from the inside of the bag. The corners have been completely fixed together so the lining can't come away and come outside. Now before we look at this finished bag, we're going to close up this opening. We're going to find out together whether or not this works. Obviously you guys know it does because you've already seen the finished product. Let's go and sew that opening closed. Okay, let's have a look at how this has turned out. Oh, it's looking good so far. Okay, so you can see on the side it tapers up. It's much wider on the base than it is on the top of the bag, and that tapers quite nicely. Woohoo! I am so pleased that I've finally worked this out. What a pain it's been. Let's do some shoulder straps. Alright, I'm using webbing for my shoulder straps. If you want to, you can get your own fabric and make some handles with the fabric that you've got your bag in. I'll take the slider, place my webbing through that over the centre ring, and then I'm going to fold the end in, move that adjustable slider further down, and then fold that across again. So one more time, bring the webbing through to the other side of that metal bar, fold that over and fold it over one more time. That will hide any raw edges or wispy bits, and we can take this to the machine and sew a box around here. I'm going to go and do that quickly now. So I've just sewn straight across here and here a few times on each side. Find the other end and grab one of your swivel clips and we'll pop that through. And then what we're going to do is, with the folded side up where our adjustable slider is, bring this end up through the top of the ring and back through the other side of the slider, and you'll have that nice and even. You can move this out of the way and just swivel that clip around to the other side. That one is fixed in place, ready to be attached to our bag, and this side here we'll pop the other swivel clip on, and with the back side of our buckle or slider, we've got that faced up. We'll fold this up once and then one more time, and we'll stitch that in place just like we did with the other end. So then what you will have is a fully adjustable bag handle. I'll sew that one together now. Okay, that's done. We can clip that to the side of our bag, and you can now have this as a bag with a short shoulder strap, or you can carry that across your body. Can I just say, as much as I love to try new things and explore the capacity of my brain, it can be really exhausting. It's late Friday night now, and I've been working on this project since Monday. The first few days I had been mucking around, drafting the pattern, working out the sizing, getting it wrong, having to start again, and I did that a few times before I had to ask for help. So everything works fine. I'm really pleased about that. But just the process of going through and only getting one video out of it at the end of the week. I had so many other plans. In my latest video, I showed you how to draft the pattern, how to create your own templates. In this video, we've put that into practice, and what I've done is made a bunch of these bags. So today I've only managed to show you how to make the larger bag, which was this one here. And I'm really happy with the shape. I love the shape of it. I'm actually going to make a ton of these. I've got 4 big ones sitting here now, and I've got another 3 to make. And I've also made the smaller one as well, using the smaller pattern that we drafted the other day. and I'm really keen to try and make some really tiny ones. I would have liked to have done that for this video, but I've just run out of time. I'm going away to Mum's tomorrow for a few days. I just don't have the time. Here's the one that I've just finished with a crossbody strap. So that is fully adjustable so that you could wear something like this over your body. Obviously, whilst it's empty, it's a little bit too big and floppy. Once you've got this bag packed fully, you'll probably need this to carry everything in there. One of my goals for making these style bags is that everything that I'm seeing has bindings on there. And most of you know, I have this aversion to bindings. Look, it really comes down to me not having the confidence to doing them very well. And I really love to have it fully enclosed seams. So I didn't want to copy everybody else's videos. I wanted to try and figure out how to make this in any size that I wanted for the fabric that I have. And I also wanted to make sure I could do it without bindings. Very important to me. I'm making these to sell. I've got lots of fabric of this size. I have 7 stripes in assorted colours. They'll be hopefully going onto my website tomorrow. And surprisingly, they haven't taken that long to make. I put the clock on. From start to finish, it took me 32 minutes to make this. That included cutting the lining, fusing the stabiliser as well. So everything from start to finish, 32 minutes. For a bag of this size, that's actually pretty good. That doesn't include the handles. The handles, I can make up a whole bunch of those in a few minutes. So I haven't included that. The products that I've used in here that I've purchased are the webbing for the tabs and the handles, the zipper pulls and little dangly things, the zip, the labels, and I think, and all my hardware. D-rings, swivel clips, and the adjustable slider. So those products cost me less than $5 wholesale to purchase, which works out about $10 retail. And my labour cost, I've put that up to $60 an hour from $45 an hour. I've calculated this at $30 to make. I've just rounded it down to the 30 minutes because I know if I'm making 5 or 6 at a time, I'll get that time down. $30 for labour. Around about $10 for material is $40. I'm actually going to sell these for $55. I think they're a good enough bag that I can do that. And if they don't sell at that price, I can always reduce it. So it's no big deal. But the giant utility bags that I make are the same size as this. And I've been selling a ton of those at $55 each. So I think that price point will work really well for these ones. The smaller one, I'll probably make that one about $35. Aren't those colours great? So I've got a couple of charcoals, a cream and the green. And I've also got lots of geometric shaped fabric that I think will look great in this style bag as well. I think it's time to call it a night. I'm going to finish editing this video so I can get it up for you. So I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall catch you next time. Bye for now.